class, this class specifically, is going to be a little bit shorter since it is just the introduction class. So I just want to make sure, so, just to kind of set the foundations before we start getting into all the important stuff. So let me just pull it up. All right, so also letting you know, like I mentioned in the syllabus, it is highly recommended that you do take notes. And yeah, so also the vocabulary is going to be in order. So if you are worried about taking the definitions, that is going to be in order, so you don't have to worry about making sure that everything's in. All right, so let's get started. So first question is, what is psychology? So sometimes psychology is kind of confusing. We don't really know what psychology kind of entails because there's just so much that factor into psychology. So basically, the shortest answer we can give you is that psychology is a study of behavior and the mental process. And that's going to be pretty important since that specifically means that we're going to be talking about a lot about behavior and how a person thinks. All right, and then obviously, why do we learn psychology? So psychology is really important. It actually it involves understanding the human condition and why people act the way they do. And you tend to learn more about yourself through psychology. And it's just overall kind of talks about, just everyone around you and about you. So you learn a lot when you learn psychology. So we have to go into the roots of psychology before we start doing anything. And so our early philosophers, they can be considered the first psychologists, as they often discuss the concepts of the mind, and they often, have debates, and even philosophers such as Buddha or Confucius, they also discussed it. And then obviously we have Socrates and Plato. And they believe that the body and the mind are separate, and that the mind is like the soul. And you can separate that, and also that knowledge is innate, which means that you're born with knowledge, and you kind of discover that knowledge within yourself. On the other hand, Aristotle kind of believes the opposite. So Aristotle believes that knowledge is not pre-existing, and it instead comes from observation. And he also believed that one cannot separate the body and the soul. So you can see that, people have a lot of different ideas about how people think. And these are just kind of speculations, at least in the early days. And then we have the kind of, we still have the roots of psychology, but this is a little bit more modern now. And we start with Francis Bacon. He is the father of modern science, and he developed the scientific method. So we have him to thank for, even all the other different types of sciences as well, since he kind of, since he developed the scientific method, thus he kind of developed, he kind of led to all the other kind of discoveries. So, you can, so like sciences such as chemistry, biology, stuff like that, we all have Francis Bacon to thank. And then we have John Locke. So John Locke developed this idea called tabula rasa, and that is Latin for blank slate. So he believed that our environment shapes us. So you can see it's kind of similar to Aristotle's, because you can see about our how everything is kind of shaped by, and we learn through what is around us. And then we have empiricism. So this is developed through Locke and Bacon's idea. And it is the belief that knowledge is created by experience, observation, and experimentation. So you can see how that um, ties in closely with John Locke in Tabula Rasa. Right, so I'm just gonna give you guys some more time if you guys have to, if you guys are taking notes. So some people are asking about the slides. So that will actually be posted afterwards. So it will be there, but it'll be after the class. So I think I scheduled it for around 4:30, 4:40, and that's gonna be yeah. So we're so after each class, that's gonna be posted. So you don't have to worry about like writing complete sentences. All right, so moving on to now the birth of modern psychology. So we first start off with Wilhelm Wundt. So he created the first psychology lab in 1879. And he kind of is the one who almost kind of introduced, psychology as a science. So yeah, and then the first psychology lab, it is located in a university in Germany. So you can see on the picture to the side, that is the university. And yeah, and then after that, psychology branched out to several early approaches. And the first one is structuralism. So structuralism is first established by E.B. Titchener, and he looked at so structuralism basically looked at the structures of the mind and relied on introspection. So this is when you ask the subject how they feel. So you can see that it is kind of unreliable. And also it is followed by Wundt as well. And then we have functionalism. So functionalism is developed by William James, and he is the father of American psychology. So he introduced psychology to the US. And functionalism looked at the functions of thoughts and emotions. And so basically it is what the mental state does and not what it is made of. So he wasn't really concerned on the structures. So you can see like structuralism and functionalism, they might sound similar, but they're very much different. And it is also very subjective. Most of these perspectives and approaches were subjective. And then we have psychoanalysis. So this is developed by Sigmund Freud. And basically psychoanalysis talked about the unconscious mind and how childhood experiences influences one's behavior. So a lot of it is kind of emphasized by what happens to us when we were a child. And that is how we are as adults. And then he also believed that sex and aggression drives people. And that is kind of why we kind of continue. And then it is also subjective, since he has patients describe their own feelings and thoughts. And then we have Gestalt. So that is basically looks at perceiving the whole rather than each part. So this is kind of vague, but an example would be if you were to look at a tree, right? You don't when you see a tree, you don't see every single branch, you don't see every single leaf. You see the tree as a tree, and instead of seeing them separately. And then, and these are the three scientists, Freud, William James, and Wilhelm Wundt. Do we have any questions? No questions? All right.
Excuse me. Are those three the ones that developed that method?
Well, these three are some of the other ones. So William James, Sigmund Freud. So those are the other early approaches. So functionalism, William James developed. Psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud developed. And then Wilhelm Wundt created the first psychology lab. So I just put in some pictures so you guys can kind of imagine what these scientists look like.
I see. Thank you.
And then we have psychology's biggest question. So nature versus nurture, this question has been debated for centuries. And basically it asks which one influences a person more. So nature states that our biology determines who we are, whether that is through our ancestral instincts or through our biological functions. So you can see that this kind of where Socrates and Plato came from, where they kind of said knowledge is innate, right? It comes within us. And then nurture states that it is our influences growing up, whether that is through our parents or through our social groups, that teaches us how to act. And, that kind of results in our behavior. And then you can see that is that is similar to Aristotle's belief, where knowledge comes from observation. So it would be observation from other people around you. And then, yeah, like I said, this question has been greatly debated, and there really isn't a correct answer. And the most agree that both factor into human behavior. There isn't, it's very much gray. There's no black and white, and that is what psychology is all about. It's basically very gray area, if that makes sense. And then we have modern psychology. So the overall approach we have is the biopsychosocial approach. And that is where behaviors and thinkings are shaped by 1, our biological, 2, psychological, and 3, sociocultural influences. And underneath that, there are 7 perspectives, and all these 7 perspectives kind of work together. So you shouldn't look at them separately, but instead you can see how each of them kind of fit in to this biopsychosocial approach. So we have psychodynamic, behaviorism, humanism, cognitive, biological, sociocultural, and evolutionary. Do you have any questions before we start talking about these perspectives? All right. So the first one we have is psychodynamic. So this studies how behavior springs from unconscious drives and conflicts. So as you can see, this is similar to psychoanalysis because it is originated from Sigmund Freud's ideas. And basically, and then Freud believed that dreams were a window to our subconscious. And we're also going to look more into this idea during our motivation, emotion, and personality units. And then we have behaviorism, where it is believed that all behaviors are learned, and they're learned through rewards and punishments. And they're really only concerned with observable behavior. So this behaviorism will come strongly in our learning unit. So we have our main players are Ivan Pavlov, B.F. Skinner, and John Watson, which I'm sure some of you guys already recognize some of these names. And then we have humanism. So humanism focuses on human potential and achievements. So this is a little bit more positive. And basically, humans are always just trying to reach their maximum potential. And our main players are Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. And then we have cognitive. So cognitive is about how humans store, process, and use information. So this is just like, you can almost kind of see our brain as a computer, how we take in information and then we spit it out, whether that is through, using it, keeping it, And yeah, and our main players are our most important one is Jean Piaget, and we're going to learn about him in our developmental unit. And then we have biological. So biological talks about how the brain, hormones, and genetics influences our behavior. So you can see this stems very, very clearly from the nature part of our nature versus nurture debate. And we don't really have a scientist specifically that talks about biological. And then we have sociocultural. So sociocultural is about how our behavior and thinking are influenced by situations and cultures. So you can see this is from our nurture section of our nature versus nurture. And then our main player is Lev Vygotsky, and he is also going to be in our developmental unit, just like in our just like Piaget from the cognitive. And then we have evolutionary. So evolutionary focuses on the roots of behavior and the mental processes and how mental processes are affected by natural selections. And this is developed by Charles Darwin, as most of you guys should know, in his theory of evolution. So this kind of talks about how a certain behavior allowed our ancestors to survive and pass down that behavior to us. So that is what evolutionary is about. Okay, so now let's take an example. So how would each perspective look at anger? So basically, first of all, psychodynamic. So how psychodynamic sees anger is usually as a unresolved conflict that happened in the past, and it can result in people lashing out in the future. And then we have behaviorism, and behaviorism is about how anger is learned through others indulging you when you act out. So this would be the rewards and punishments, right? When you act out as a child, if your parents indulged you, they rewarded you in a sense, where they let you do whatever you want because you lashed out. And that's why you're perhaps more likely to lash out as an adult. And then you have humanism. So humanism viewed anger as a roadblock that prevented you from reaching your best self. So humanism is always about reaching your full potential. And most people don't reach it. And one of the reasons could be because of anger. You're blinded through anger. And then we have cognitive. So cognitive believes that anger comes from processing certain stimuluses and reacting in the way that makes the most sense. And just like how a computer, it would process an information and then kind of figure out what is the best way of approaching something. And then we have biological. So biological, we look at our anatomy, right? So anger is the activation of a certain neurotransmitter, and we'll talk about that later, and how anger stems from the amygdala, which is a part of our brain that we'll talk about in the future as well. And we also have sociocultural. So that basically talks about how our certain cultures interpret and process anger in certain ways. So there are certain cultures that are less angry, that react in a less aggressive way. And US, actually, the United States, they tend to be more aggressive compared to other cultures such as Japan. And that is often influenced by the people around us and how they act. And then we have evolutionary. So our ancestors tended to express anger in the name of survival. So perhaps they had to act more aggressive, right, to protect your territory, perhaps, and that allowed them to survive and then pass that behavior down to their descendants. And that is all for today. So like I said, this presentation is really short because this is just kind of some really basic stuff that introduces what we will be learning about in the future. So we have an assignment, so we have to research one of the 7 perspectives, and you will find that in the assignments folder, and it's going to be posted in a bit. And then and then next week we will be talking about the scientific foundations of psychology. All right, so since that is it, you guys can, go ahead and log off if you guys need to, if you guys want to go now. And if you have any questions, you can stay behind.